These are some of the best items I've hydro dipped on this channel so far, and these are some of the materials I use to prepare them. So if you want to know how to design items like that, then welcome to episode 2 of Hydro Dipping for Beginners. This episode is about how to prepare your items. So in this video, I will be using this pair of sunglasses to demonstrate the principles of preparing your item. You might recognize these from an earlier video, and I think they turned out pretty well. So if you're interested in seeing another type of sunglasses that have already been dipped, then go ahead and check that out. But typically the first thing you want to do when you have an item, whether it's old or new or whatever it is, you pretty much want to wash it. That is the first step. After you wash it, step 2 of preparing your item is sanding it off. You're going to want to sand off any factory finish or gloss that's on there and make it a nice rough surface for paint to adhere to. Now your goal here is not necessarily to scratch the heck out of it, but you do want it to have, you don't want it to feel too smooth. You want it to feel pretty rough. I've always wondered what sandpaper people will use because I don't know if it's too coarse or too fine, and I've tried several things ranging from like 320 up to 1500 grit, which is a lot. And I've kind of settled on this 800 grit. Seems to do the job pretty nicely for most things that you don't want to scratch out, but you do want to de-gloss pretty much. But after you sand off and wash off your object, you are going to move on to the second to last step of preparing your item. And this is the final cleaning. I recommend using one of these 3 liquids. Alcohol is a great way to just get one more sterilization of your item if there's still some oils left on it from your skin after washing. Then there's mineral spirits, which is great if there's some paint on your item. And finally, there is classic acetone, which is mainly used on shoes, leather shoes especially. Like in my Air Force One video, I used acetone to prepare that. Okay, so at this stage, I'll usually put on gloves to avoid getting any more oils from my skin on the object, and then I'll clean it off with whatever I think it really needs. In this situation, I'm going to be using the alcohol, just because I don't really think it has any paint that needs to be cleaned off with the mineral spirits, or that it really needs the acetone, which is mainly for like leather stuff. I realized I said that was the second to last step before dipping, but I had actually forgotten one of the most important steps. The next step is actually taping off your item. On our example here, it's not the biggest deal. I mean, I could hydro dip the whole thing and it really wouldn't be that significant, but I do like protecting the little silver pieces as I showed you in the other video. So for this, I just use this Scotch 2060 rough surface tape. It's worked great for me so far. It sticks to just about anything I need it to. I started with basic blue painter's tape and it wasn't bad, but it didn't adhere as much as I wanted to some of the items, so I upgraded to the rough surface tape, and so far I've had no problems. I use it for just about everything. Okay, sometimes it isn't spectacular, but it still looks pretty good, so moving on to the last step of dipping. So for the final step of preparing your item for hydro dipping, you want to prime it. Priming your item is really important when you want maximum paint adhesion and the best finish you can get. Typically, I'll shake the can of primer spray for about a minute or 2 before using it to prime my item. What I use is a Rust-Oleum 2x American Accents primer, and it works just fine. I've been using it since the beginning and I've had no problems so far. The main thing to keep in mind about priming is that you want multiple light coats. This avoids any paint dripping or cracking. Another thing to keep in mind when you're priming is that you're going to want to spray about 8 to 12 inches away from the object. You don't want to be too close because you might make the coat too heavy, and you don't want to be too far because none of the paint is going to get on the object.
Another thing I always recommend when using spray paint at all is to wear a respirator.
Since I just primed it, it's not too bad, but when you're actually hydro dipping and getting down in it, you are gonna want to protect your lungs because it can get really, really heavy.
Personally, I like to play it safe and wear this whenever I can because it just irritates my lungs a whole lot because I guess I just got weak lungs. But
since you stuck around, I will show you why it is so important to prepare your items properly in the form of some of my messier dips. For the Vans, I think it was just a matter of painting them too thick, which led to them having too much paint and cracking really easily. For the PlayStation, I think it was a combination of not properly preparing the surface as well as too much paint and of a wrong type of paint. I used like a satin paint. And finally, my first pair of Nicer Hydro Dip shoes, the Tommy Hilfigers, they turned out really good. You can check out the video, but unfortunately I did not prepare the surface well enough and the paint did crack off. As hard as it is for me to admit, that is what happened, and it's because you want to follow these steps well. I mean, you just want to prepare your surface as good as you can and give yourself the best possible chance of not having to redo it. Alright, before I wrap up the video, I'm gonna ask one favor of you guys. If you wouldn't mind, I'd really appreciate it if you just left a comment saying one thing I did well on in this video and one thing I could improve on. It should only take you about 10 seconds and it really helped me out in knowing what you want to see and increasing the quality of my content. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching and stay tuned for the next video on hydro dipping for beginners. Have a good one.